Hi, welcome to our discussion of the Stage 27 about the language 2, where we learn about result clauses. Now, back in Stage 24, we began seeing the subjunctive in cum clauses, and then in Stage 25, we added in indirect questions. And in both of these kinds of subordinate clauses, the pluperfect subjunctive shows prior action, action in the subordinate clause that happens before the action in the main clause. Whereas the imperfect subjunctive in the subordinate clause shows contemporaneous or subsequent action. That is, action that is happening the same time as the action in the main clause or future to, after the action in the main clause. So let's look at some examples. First, a cum clause. Cum milites impetum facerent, Britanniae valde timebant. Okay, while the soldiers were making an attack, the Britons were very afraid. Okay, so the making an attack is happening at the same time as the being afraid, because that's an imperfect subjunctive. Now let's look at an indirect question with an imperfect subjunctive. Centurio milites rogavit cor ad orbem currerant. The centurion was asking the soldiers why they were running to the city. So the running is happening at the same time as the asking. Now let's look at some examples of pluperfect subjunctives. So here's a cum clause. Cum milites vilas dele vicent, Britanni fugerat. When the soldiers had destroyed the houses, the Brits fled. So the destruction of the houses happens prior to the fleeing. An indirect question with the pluperfect subjunctive. Rex quintum rogavit num parentes superfuissent. The king asked Quintus whether his parents had survived. Okay, so the surviving happens before the asking, and that's why we have a pluperfect subjunctive there. Okay, so in stage 26, we began using the subjunctive in purpose clauses, and in stage 27, we began using the subjunctive in indirect commands and now result clauses. So a couple of examples. Milites ad orbem cucurerunt ut vilas incenderant. That's a purpose clause. The soldiers ran to the city in order that they might burn the houses. Rex templum intravit ut victim sacrificaret. The king entered the temple in order that he might sacrifice a victim. So those are purpose clauses, and those both have an imperfect subjunctive. Purpose clauses, indirect commands, and result clauses always show contemporaneous or subsequent action. So they are always going to use the imperfect subjunctive. Okay, they're not going to use the pluperfect subjunctive. So here's a purpose clause. Rex templum intravit ut victimam sacrificaret. That's that same one we just saw. The king entered the temple in order that he might sacrifice a victim. Now here's an indirect command. Rex nobis persuasit ut victimum sacrificaremus. So the king persuaded us that we sacrifice the victim, to sacrifice the victim. Imperfect subjunctive, right? Because the sacrificing has got to happen same time as the persuading or after the persuading, subsequent to the persuading. And now a result clause. Rex tam litus erat ut dei gratias agrat. The king was so happy that he gave thanks to the goddess. Again, imperfect subjunctive, agrat, because the giving thanks is happening same time as the being happy or subsequent to it, future to it, after it. So let's talk a little bit more about result clauses. Here's the one we just had. Rex tam litus erat ut dei gratias agrat. The king was so happy that he gave thanks to the goddess. Result clauses very, very often will have a word in the main clause, in the independent clause, like Tom ita seek, tantus talus tot or adeo. Tom so, ita in such a way, seek in such a way, tantus so great, talus of such a sort, tot so many, adeo to such an extent. Those are the kinds of words in the main clause that trigger a result clause. You're not always going to have them, but very, very often you will.